The City of Bel Air Beach Park and Recreation Board, Monday, October 7th, 5 p.m., call to order. So the first thing on the agenda is, why don't we just say that everybody that's on the board is present, as far as roll calls, okay? All right, so number one would be the approval of the agenda. Everybody could take time and look at the agenda. Did you get a copy?
Yes.
Need a motion from someone?
Well, this is, I have a copy of the minutes of last meeting, but agenda for today, I don't think so.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I second it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda's passed. Okay, so now we need to do the approval of two different sets of minutes because we didn't do the last ones. So we need to do the approval of the September 5th minutes. Has everybody reviewed those?
Yes. Thank you, Bert, for tremendous detail and some meandering conversations. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So do I have a motion on the floor to approve the September 5th meeting?
I make a motion to approve the September 5th, 2019 meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the second thing for number 2 on the list is approval of the September 23rd, 2019 meeting minutes. Do I have a, sorry, my
I
throat.
took them, so I should probably not make a motion.
Okay, do I have a motion from the floor to approve the September 23rd?
I approve.
Second it?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? September 23rd meetings are approved. So we will, you and I will sign these before we leave this meeting. Okay? All right. So the third thing I need to bring up is the presentation of the strategic plan by Vice Mayor Gunn. He's been so wonderful in volunteering to come in and talk to us about it, making sure that we're up to speed on it and what our role is in the city with this in reference to the strategic plan. Vice Mayor Gunn.
Hey, thanks for the invitation and congrats to the Park and Boards Committee. You did a great job with the festival there, and I think you guys set the bar pretty high for future events. And so far as coordination and attention to detail goes, man, you guys really did a stellar job. So
Thank you.
I know June's crunching the numbers, and I think from what I've seen, they really look exemplary. So you're setting a high bar for future events here. Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to talk about the strategic plan. I'm sure you've all read through it at some point. I mean, it's kind of like a cookbook in the actual document. So what I hope to do today is just to give you some background on it and some understanding, because like flying, a systems approach is kind of nice because you kind of want to understand why things are there, and just like medicine, understanding how the basic systems work and that sort of thing. When you're presented with a problem that's not in the textbooks or in the archives or literature, you kind of get a chance to sit there, and that's what education is all about, to help you work through some of those things. The other aspect of being able to sit down with some fresh minds is a different perspective, and that's kind of nice, and also to engender some disciples, because the more you know about it, you know, it's kind of a extrapolation and a synergy. You'll get out there, and everybody you tell will kind of have a better understanding and kind of understand, okay, that's why we're doing that stuff, and this is how all the pieces fit together. There's a lot of moving parts there. So, and lastly, maybe to try to hit some of the points and underscore your piece of the puzzle of how you're going to fit into this thing, and where you can provide inputs and the strategic significance and what you bring to the table so far as Bel Air Beach and its strategic plan goes. So I'm looking at page 2, just to recap, and these are a lot of the things that went into educating the council members, the last council, and the strategic plan is a living, breathing document, and it was originally intended to be reviewed and updated on a yearly basis once the new council met and new members came in, to make sure that everybody agreed on the priorities and the goals and the objectives and that sort of thing. So firstly, the strategic plan provides the shared vision of how we think Bel Air Beach should look. It gives us a good idea of the common baseline of what we should be looking at and what we consider to be important to reaching the Bel Air Beach that we want it to be. Okay. Lastly, it institutionalizes all of that thought process and documents all the reasoning behind it and why we did some of those things. So along with the changeover in leadership all the time, it also provides some continuity to some things. So that's why it's so important to institutionalize some of this stuff. It serves, and these are the lenses and filters that we use to kind of build the strategic plan. We obviously have certain core values and assumptions, and these are the guiding principles that we use to build the strategic plan. And some of the things we consider in that is what's the most effective thing, what's the right thing to do, what's the right way of doing it, can we make it last, and if something changes, can we bounce back, and are we flexible enough to deal with emergencies or unexpected changes to the plan? Okay, and you can see how everything nets down and how any problems that come in from the left, anything we try to accomplish here, whether it's budgets, whether it's our capital improvement plan, we should be filtering it through our goals and priorities, because you've got a lot of competing demands for very limited resources. We don't have a big budget here. We don't have the commercial tax base, so we have a very huge pressure on our limited resources here. So we have to really have a structured way of looking at it to figure out what the priorities are and what we have to deal with now, what we can afford to deal with now, and what we can send to the bottom of the list and deal with at a later time. Okay. Elements of the strategic plan, you've probably read through the strategic plan and you've seen the vision statement, what we aspire to be, the big picture mission statement, some core values for the culture of our city and the staff and our elected officials, the goals, and these are the broad statements of what we consider to be the strategic emphasis. What are those key things that we must focus on to get to our mission and our vision? Okay, and if the thinking is if we can focus on those goals, then the logic is everything else follows. Below the goals, what we do is we start giving more and more specificity to what are those actual tasks that need to be accomplished to support those goals and ultimately support the strategic plan. So the further and further you get down in this pyramid of the strategic plan, the more specificity, the more granularity you're getting in what you're trying to accomplish, as well as how you're going to do it. And of course, once you get to the objectives, you neck it down even further with an action plan. Who owns that objective? What's the timeline for it? What are the metrics for it? What's it going to cost? Who's responsible for the reporting? All of that stuff. Okay. The Bel Air Beach vision statement, at the time, to become a premier Gulf Coast residential community. That's a very broad statement, right? Very, very big mouthful. Keyword premier. Gulf Coast, we're kind of a waterfront community. We like being near the water. We like being on the water. We like water sports, all those things about it. And recognizing the fact that we're a residential community. That's a key aspect of this vision statement. So far as the mission goes, create the high level of resident satisfaction. We think if we create satisfaction in the residents, then we create a place where people want to live. And obviously, it's a supply and demand issue, so we all benefit because not everybody can live here at the same time who wants to live here, so property values go up and everybody's happy, okay? And some of the ways we get there, you know, we focus on having a beautiful, friendly, safe, well-managed waterfront community. Core values as city officials, employees, and this is really, you know, this kind of trickles down to boards and committees and anybody who represents the city and does the biddings of the city. So we strive for excellence in all we do, courtesy, enthusiasm, respect, value, safety, teamwork, the worth of others, integrity, ethics, transparency, and most of all, being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. That's typical government service, right? Okay, so we start off with a bunch of assumptions, and what we did was, the way the process works is you kind of sit around and you brainstorm things. Anybody who's kind of been through that sort of stuff understands how the analytical thought process works. You just start throwing up ideas, no attribution, no discussion really, just throwing up ideas, and you just brainstorm a bunch of stuff. And then we start necking it down from there. We have the discussion and the debate, and then you start prioritizing things. But some of the things we hit upon, and it's really key for every group who deals with this thing and comes back and reviews the strategic plan to go back through the assumptions and review the assumptions, because you have to validate whether those assumptions still hold, or, hey, we live in a very fluid, very dynamic society and environment, and things change. You know, the big thing we're going to be talking about tonight is social media, and that's had a huge impact on things. You know, the landscape has changed immensely on some of that stuff. Cell phones change the landscape on how we communicate, how we do business, and how we stay in touch with things, and you know, just knowledge in general. I mean, kids aren't taught the same things, and there seems to be a real dependency upon, oh, well, you know, I can Google it. I don't have to know the multiplication tables anymore or how to do certain things, because I can do all of that on my phone. So that's why we need to go back and look at some of these things. Bel Air Beach demographics are relatively constant. If you go back through a couple years, you see they haven't changed much. At one time, I think it was even George that brought it, was understanding the age demographics of the Bel Air Beach. And you know, I've gone back, and I'm sure everybody here has probably gone into some of the city data sites and pulled up some of those numbers, but there are breakdowns of, you know, what percentage of the population is under age 6, what's under age 10, you know, what's the average age of our population, that sort of thing. So it all goes to making informed decisions and understanding where your priorities should be. Okay. And you try to do the best you can to make a logical business-based decision, but it's sometimes, if the collective wisdom of the city staff, the boards and committees are to, hey, you know, this one doesn't quite fit, but we think it's important because it fits some other aspect of the strategic plan, then, hey, we can have a discussion about that, and if everybody agrees and there's a consensus, then we reshuffle the priorities a little bit, we reshuffle the budget a little bit, and do what we think is best for the community at the time. Communications, we talk about residents like to be informed, but guess what? They don't necessarily want to participate in government. Everybody who's kind of sat in an elected official position or dealt on boards and committees kind of understand that, you know, there's basically 3 groups of people. There's that group of really informed and they want to stay engaged. There are the people where an issue touches them and they want to come and have their voice heard. But by far, it's that silent majority in between where no issue touches them. You know, everything's copacetic. I'm just happy. I go to work, come home, have my dinner, watch my TV. And so long as municipal government of Bel Air Beach doesn't touch me, I'm happy. You guys are obviously doing a stellar job, and just leave me alone. So that's what we're looking at here. Traffic congestion is only going to get worse. A major storm eventually will impact Bel Air Beach. Property values will generally continue to increase. Stormwater flooding is a significant and expensive issue. It's one you'll see later on in the goals and objectives. Red tide. I kind of gloss over sea level rise all the time. It's just like global warming. You tell me. Bel Air Beach strategic plan is a living document that needs to be reviewed all the time. So the next page is just kind of your organizational chart. You've got the vision at the top. We want to be that premier community, the mission, residential satisfaction, resident satisfaction. And then we get those broad categories of strategic focus. And I'll get into this a little bit more. But these are essentially the 5 groups that the last city council came up with. Safety, return on the taxpayers' investment in dollars, aesthetics, and community. And then we've got communications, and we've got the beach. Objectives, we talked about, hey, that's just kind of adding some more specificity to these broad goals. And you'll see on the very next page, on the very left-hand side, you see those broad goals there. You've got the public safety and health, tax dollar value, aesthetics, community, comms, beach water. Now you see that they're actually, top to bottom, they're prioritized, goal 1, goal 2 through 5. And that's the priority that the council set for those things. We said, okay, the public safety is always first and foremost in that thing. Health of our residents is important. Tax dollar value is always a thing that you're competing with there, because we talked about we've got a lot of demands on the budget. So you have to make some very business-based decisions. You have to use some logical decision-making thought process with this stuff. And some things float to the top, some things float to the bottom. And what goes along with that is risk management. You have to look at the severity of the consequence versus the exposure to the risk. And you factor those things into deciding the priorities of things and how some of those things compete for the dollar. Aesthetics and community, creating a vibrant, well-manicured, well-planned city appearance, an atmosphere that enriches our sense of community and the quality of life. Communications, beach and water. Now you can probably look at this as a board and kind of get an idea of, ooh, you know, that kind of fits into what we focus on, or I think this board plays a role in it. You know, just off the top of my head, I would say, you know, a healthy environment for our residents factors into you. Obviously, competing for the tax dollars, because at the end of the day, things that you want to carry forward with your agenda has to compete against, hey, we got to repave roads, we got to replace street lights, that sort of thing. Aesthetics and community. I mean, aesthetically pleasing city appearance is important, but this sense of community and quality life, that all kind of aligns with things that this board has to deal with. Communications factors is across the board. I mean, you can kind of look at some of this stuff, and I don't know if you've dealt with organizations, matrix organizations versus stovepipe functional organizations, but a lot of these things go all the way through all categories, no matter what board and committee you're sitting on. You're dealing with tax dollars, you're dealing with communications, you're dealing with health and safety, all that stuff there. So in the middle, you've got the goals, they're prioritized, you've got kind of a broad definition. And then on the right side, what you see is we're starting to neck it down and add some specificity to those things with objectives. And you can see that some of them are crossed off. And because guess what? We have started building a to-do list out of these things. We have this whole pot of things that need to get done in the city. Well, we start going through those lenses and filters and going against the priorities, and we can't do it all at one time. So what we do is we take like the top 1 or 2 objectives in each category and start doling those out. You know, the city manager maintains an objectives list there, and he's got owners for the objectives, he's got deadlines and reporting dates on some of those things. Looking ahead, I mean, the strategic plan was to kind of give us a way forward with this thing, a structured way forward. Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? We never really had this thing, you know. We were just kind of meandering through this thing, and it was, what's the crisis du jour? And we'll deal with that today, and we'll deal with whatever rears its ugly head tomorrow. Well, we still have to deal with that. I mean, that's why we've got these tactical guys here, because they're dealing with the daily operations and the crises that come up. And then it's up to the boards, committees, and the council to provide some long-term direction for them to kind of be working on the side and helping manage the budgets. And you know, we've got a certain amount of money in the bank right now, and we're kind of using that to supplement our annual budgets, because the expenses we spend every year aren't necessarily bringing in enough money in the city to pay for all those. So we're taking some money out of the piggy bank right now to catch up on our backlog of deferred infrastructure repairs and improvements, that sort of thing. Some of these things are kind of stretch goals, and we'll see that a little bit later, but where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? I think we want to get ahead of this aging infrastructure with budgeting and planning. Things aren't getting any cheaper to repair or replace. So obviously, replacing them today with today's dollars are going to be cheaper than repairing it or replacing it 3 to 5 years from now. Some of those things we just can't afford to do right now, and that's where this priority comes in and business decision making comes in. 3 to 5 years, be prepared for that major storm that we know it's coming. Maybe harden the infrastructure. One of the buzzwords right now is resiliency. How quickly can you bounce back? How well have we planned for it? Have we put things in motion and stockpiled resources or dollars or whatever to meet the impacts of future storms or crises or problems that rear up?
And what do you mean by when you say prepared? Be well prepared for a major storm? What does it entail by prepared?
Well, one of those things is, I mean, just this year, Kyle went through and reviewed our disaster management plan. So just making sure that we are using those lessons learned by the Panhandle after the big storm hits up there. What are things that we can do today to engender this idea of resiliency? He's got some contracts already in place with some of the cleanup and debris cleanup. So guess what? The week after the storm, we're not competing with everybody who hadn't thought about that stuff to get those people in here. I mean, he's looking down the road, and it goes with this idea of in the military, you red team things or you murder board things where, you got guys working on optimizing a plan, what's the best plan, but at the same time you got a couple people who are coming up with and playing the devil's advocate. Well, that's a great plan, but what if this happens, or you didn't think of this, or whatever? Well, that's part of that. It's
a response thing?
It's a lot of things: preparation, response, cleanups, having money in the bank ready to go. There's a lot of things involved in that preparation. I mean, how do you prepare at home? Well, you stock up on batteries, you stock up on water. You have a plan ahead of time. Where am I going to go if I have to head out? I better gas the car. I mean, all of those things just on a bigger scale for the city, right? Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm a scientist, so I think about, as a scientist, how would I prepare for an event like that? It's a little different than response to an event like that. It's pre-preparing, knowing if it comes north of us or south of us, there's a really big difference. It comes just inland, so we have to be able to respond to
Multitude of things, variables. There's some variables. If we don't get directly hit, then there's some other things that we might have to look at opposed to the normal direct hit, is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
And
not just assuming the worst, but assuming what will happen if it goes west of us, east of us.
Sure. Sure.
south of us,
Eh,
are our seawalls high enough? If we increase their height by 1 foot, how much will that ameliorate the damage? All those things are important. I didn't know if Kyle's been saddled with all of that or not.
Sorry, wait.
I think some of that takes place because what happens is when those events are forming up and we are in that cone, he's sitting in on a daily briefing at the county level and the Florida state level, and they're kind of doing that kind of risk management kind of stuff. Well, right now the odds are it's going to go north, it's going to go south, or otherwise it's going to be a direct impact. And what are those things you better be thinking about? It's risk management. Again, it's the severity of the consequences. It may not be down to the level you're talking about. Well, is it going to be, well, some of it is actually. What's going to be the surge? Is it going to be 1 to 3 feet? Is it going to be 3 to 6 feet? Is it going to be 9 feet? Those are the things that they're kind
And
of
that largely is dependent on if it goes east of us, west of us, north of us.
Sure.
And that's the variables that we were just,
Yeah.
And just like everything else from the military, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. So, and or flexibility is a key to indecision, right? You got to maintain some flexibility, and that's why you got to be able to be flexible and change things. But if you've already looked ahead and you know what's important, and I think you're kind of on the road and being as prepared as you can get. Yeah, every situation is going to be different. A big storm is going to be situational. What is a wind? What is a surge? Which way is it going to go? North, south, east, west? So we just do as much as we can.
All right, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's all right.
I had a question about what we meant by that word.
Let's see here. Number 4, optimize utilization of all assets. We only have a couple of key revenue producing assets in this city. We don't have a commercial tax base. So what is really generating money for the city? And we are going to, as a council, start, and it goes with the communication thing, getting word out there of what is the budget, what's a capital improvement plan there, how much money are we taking in, how much money is going out, prioritizing these things. Right now, the capital improvement plan is the expansion joint in our budget. We only take so much money in, we can only put so much money out. So the real expansion joint into this is how much of the infrastructure, capital improvement, or fixes do we want to make? That's the real expansion joint in the budget. We can do a lot, but we have to take more money out of the bank to do it, or we do less, but guess what? Things start backlogging in the infrastructure. Streets start wearing out, telephone poles start leaning over, seawalls start falling down, all of that. So, City Hall is a revenue stream for us. Obviously, we have ad valorem taxes, we have fees and permits, that kind of thing that we make money on, marina rentals, but some key aspects we need to be thinking about is the community center. This is a huge portion, a huge asset for us, okay? Not everybody is aware that we are carrying a huge debt load on this building, right? We are still paying for this building, and right now, that debt comes to approximately $200,000 a year. $16,000 a month are going out to paying for this place right now, okay?
and just so you know, this board actually had been looking at that, and we've been promoting this hall rental around different cities and so forth, our businesses and so forth, trying to get this facility.
And that's
rented.
why I highlight that, because we really need to be looking at leveraging this place. Okay, we said $16,000 a month is going out for the debt load on this place. Rentals are not bringing in $16,000 a month on this, right? So we need to get some creative ideas going here, innovative uses for this thing. The marina is another one of those things. It's a revenue stream for us, but we only have a limited number of docks down there. A portion of them aren't even leased out to residents of Bel Air Beach. There's a percentage of those that are rented out to non-Bellar Beach residents. Is there room for expansion? Well, there was a plan floated years ago, and we finally dug it out and dusted it off and said, gee, maybe it's time to kind of start taking a look at this thing. The marina, those docks bring in money, but I'll tell you what, go down there and look at that property, and what's the most striking thing is the marina's bringing in the money, but look at the percentage of the marina that is just that parking lot that's doing nothing. It's just a vacant piece of land sitting there. And we need to start thinking about innovative ways of leveraging that property. Maybe, there's a way of developing it for some other revenue stream. I don't know. What are some of those ideas? But I think this board now has a vested interest in the marina, right? That comes
Right.
kind of under
Right.
your auspices. So, hey,
And I did some homework on a grant that is out there to help address extending the slips. Right? Is that what you call them? Slips, docks,
Yeah.
whatever. Slips at the marina, so we can actually create more revenue for the city with that. So
Right.
I actually have a copy of the contract. the grant for that.
So we just need to start taking a very broad view of what's out there, and we start that brainstorm thing. Well, let's sell it to the Indians and build a casino on it and take a percent. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out there. Who knows? I don't know, but it's, then we start coming up with some ideas and start necking it down, what'll work, what doesn't work. I don't know.
Put the dunk tanks there.
Yeah, there you
We
go.
need to do that more often.
Yeah, every council member could have their individual. Let's see, where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? There's some other things kind of thrown out there. There's some blanks here, and by all means, at your leisure, go through this package and maybe scribble in some things, and we'll get together later on. I think number 3 is a very important part of this strategic planning thing that we haven't done here. We've got these goals, and the piece of the puzzle that's missing is we make a very broad statement, okay? Safety and health, whatever. But we don't define what the end state is. We say we want an aesthetically pleasing community, but we don't say what an aesthetically pleasing, we don't define what an aesthetically pleasing is. We talk about engendering community, but we don't define what constitutes engendering that sense of community. So the idea is once we define what the steady state is for some of these things, then we can understand what the recurring costs are to maintain that steady state, and that's how we backtrack that into the budget. Oh, well, guess what? 5 years from now, once we've fixed all the streets, paved the streets, replaced all the leaning street poles, done all the things, repaired all the seawalls, now we're in the steady state, just recurring maintenance. What's that going to cost to maintain that steady state there? Kyle has already taken a jump on that because he's come up with a maintenance plan for this thing that kind of defines, okay, this needs to be done on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, a daily basis, and this is what it should look like. And then, we kind of figure out what it costs to maintain that stuff. And so we're working in that direction. It's a very iterative, slow process, but once we get there, it's going to be solid. And something to understand is the strategic plan is part of a family of plans, and they're all linked together. We've got this strategic plan which sits at the top of the pyramid, and that kind of gives us the broad outlook of what it's supposed to look like. Underneath of that, we have a budget plan, budget process. We have a capital improvement plan and a process, and it's all linked. Whenever we obligate or allocate money for something, the question that needs to be asked is, what goal is that supporting, and is that the priority that it's supposed to be spent in, right? We don't just say, oh yeah, that seems like a nice project, well, let's throw some money at that. Well, where does it fit in the hierarchy of our priorities and our goals? So, just like you write checks at home, I don't have a unlimited pocketbook. So, you know, there has to be some priority of, okay, well, what am I gonna write a check for this month or this year? And there has to be some planning in that sort of thing. Let's see. Stretch goals, okay? So this is looking even further down the road. Where do we want to be maybe in 10 years? What do we want to be? And we just throw some things out there. And I mean, literally, these are just
I
some,
have a question about this. When you all looked at these long-term goals, I mean, you did that collectively, or was that with you and the city manager for these long-term?
a lot of that was myself and the city manager. The issue is bringing together a group like this. I don't know if you've ever really participated in a strategic planning build. It's not something that's done in 2 hours of a day. It's not done in a 20-minute briefing. It's not done, you know, it's typically not even done over months. It's typically done where the group gets together, you go off-site, you close yourself in a room for 3 days and literally start at, okay, what's the vision? What's the mission? And I mean, literally, you're shotgunning stuff up on the board and saying, okay, well, we got 20 things there. Give me the top 5. We'll multi-vote it down and get it down. So it's a very huge process, and that's something we're struggling with right now. Just trying to get the group together to review and validate this thing is an issue. So that's where we're trying to engender and share and baseline everybody on this stuff, where everybody starts asking the question, well...
So I guess my other part to that question is then, if in these long-term stretch goals, was this part of the thing that was submitted to council
No.
and approved? No.
Well, the balloon was floated past them, but I mean, there was never any action, no
Okay.
discussion. So
Okay.
these, and you see there at the end of, just behind objectives there, these are examples.
Okay.
So, I mean, any of the numbers in there, you could replace with an underline and a question mark there. It's
Okay.
just to give you an idea. Hey, you know, we always deal with the revenue side of this thing. A lot of we're talking about how do we create new revenue streams. Well, anybody who's worked in government is more familiar with working from the expenditure side, right? Because we don't have unlimited funds. It's not like we can work extra hours to bring in more business. It's not like we can raise prices or whatever. So, I mean, there's two sides of the coin. You can either make more money, or you can reduce your needs and wants, right? That's...
Well, and the reason I was questioning that is because, you know, usually when you go into a grant, you know, they're usually only like a year out. And this plan, and this was a grant that I'm investigating, is for the marina, but I see this plan as 2024. So I just want to make sure that it's fallen in line with
No.
the city's strategic plan if I try to pursue it.
No, I mean, this is nailing Jello to the wall. I mean, it's just, it's written in pencil. And,
Okay.
you may want to come up with your own stretch goals for your board. I mean, when you start talking grants, you know, and a lot of the grant people are looking, does your city have a strategic plan? I mean, that's typically one of the things they're looking at. What are your goals in the next 3 to 5 years? So maybe the Parks and Recreation Board sets its own stretch goals. I mean, hopefully it'll align with the strategic plans of and goals of the city.
Correct.
But those are all things. I mean, these were basic, very broad brush ideas that the city manager and I just kind of threw out there.
Okay.
And at some point, if we...
Well, we don't want, that my big thing is we don't want to work against what the council has voted on or agreed to. So, you know, we don't want to be doing anything against what we're supposed to be doing.
Well,
So
then,
that's
I mean,
the
if-
big thing here I'm trying to factor in.
The...
We're all aware of that.
Yeah, so the actual strategic plan that you find on the city website, that's it. All of this is just background information and
Okay.
thought process, okay? And if there's any questions and you want to make sure there's total agreement and alignment, you should come before the council and say, you know, we're looking at this idea or whatever, and, you know, this is how we think it aligns with you. Is there a conflict here or some opposing thought? So, I mean...
Okay.
And, it's just like everything else, you come before, you bring an idea or recommendation. I mean, it's not just throwing it over the transom, say, hey, here's a great idea, council, you should do this. Come with a recommendation, here, we've done some homework on this is how we got to this idea, this recommendation, this is the logical thought that's gone into it. It aligns with your business plan, your strategic plan, your budget, your strategic plan, all of these things. I mean, show the logical basis. I mean, show the legal argument. I mean, you're going to give a recommended treatment for something. Well, it's based on some logical thought. I mean, I studied this, this is what I see. Yeah, we've only got 80% of the information we need, but we're going to make an informed decision here. And if you wait for 99%, you get into that analysis paralysis mode. Hey, we're a bunch of smart people sitting around this place. Let's make a informed decision on some of this stuff. And as always, when somebody sits up there and tries to shoot a hole in it, says, no, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. It says, well, here's my data. Where's yours? We put the thought into it. Don't just sit there and tell me it's not going to work. I mean, show me the data. The OODA loop here. This goes to so much in everything we deal with. Observation, orientation, deciding, and acting. Everything we do in life is basically, hey, what's going on around us? It's situational awareness, right? What just happened? It's an accurate perception of what just happened, what's happening right now, what's about to happen. Situational awareness, okay? Orientation, okay? What I just saw, what I'm expecting to happen, how does that fit into what options do I have? Okay, these are my options to fit what I'm seeing. Okay, what is my best option? These are all my alternatives. What's my best option? I've made a decision. We've made that informed decision. Do something. This is what we propose. This is what we're going to do. Everything you do is going to have consequences. Well, you start the cycle all over again. Well, how did that work out for you? Right? Maybe we need to tweak it here and there. Well, the cycle just keeps going around and around and around. Now this orientation, there's this triangle here, and it's our family of plans. We've got our strategic plan, we've got our budget plan, we've got our capital improvement plan. It's all linked, so we need to kind of look big picture and make sure that the priorities are correct. That's how we orient all of these things, then we make that decision. Let's see, man, I'm using up all your time here, I'm sorry. Review the goals for specificity. We're kind of doing that now. The new council will be going through, and in the next work session, actually, in October, this month, we're going to be reviewing the strategic plan, and we're revisiting the objectives. As you saw in that original graphic, some of these objectives are getting scratched off because we gave the city manager and the city staff a to-do list, and they're marching down it and crossing stuff off. So we need to look at our objective list and say, well, has something replaced it? Is a priority still the same as when we looked at it a year ago? And what moves up now to fill the vacuum? And I mean, we don't want to just throw them 15 or 20 objectives at one time. We've got a very limited staff here, and they need to prioritize their time and deal with things. So once again, we need to set priorities for some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is just consideration for that stuff. What I've done is in the last pages there, just kind of broken down by goals some of the objectives that have been thrown up on the wall there. And these are some of the things that will be moving up to replace some of those objectives that are being accomplished and being scratched off the list. Now the highlighted one there, facilitate the healthy lifestyle for residents, parks, trails, and greenways. That's what we just talked about. These are kind of those things that kind of touch your expertise and area of focus with parks and recreation. You can kind of look at these at your leisure. You can see on the next page, and they're not all like that, but there's some blanks there, and by all means take a look and scribble in some suggestions or brainstorm ideas and that sort of thing. tax dollar value, there's some highlighted stuff there. Leveraging grants, special assessments. We only get money from fees, ad valorem taxes, revenue streams from our assets, and we're not leveraging grants enough. We don't have the expertise, we don't have an owner for that. We need to start building that expertise, and it cuts across the entire organization, not only within the functional boards and committees, but the city staff, public works, the city clerk, all of that needs to be thinking about grant money. It's out there. The problem is, it doesn't just fall in your lap. That's not the way grants work. You have to get out there, you have to shake the bushes and be proactive and look for the stuff. You have to be creative in going after it. You have to be smart about how you build things. Like infrastructure, we let contracts to do projects. Well, one of the things we're going to start doing is we're going to start tapping the engineering firms to build the project so it gives us a competitive edge for going after grant money. And or we start changing the scope of the project to make us look more competitive for grant
Right.
money.
Might I add into that too, though, some of these grants are very simplified that this board can do themselves, okay? I mean, I'm not an expert in grant writing, but the one that I have a copy of, we're perfectly capable of doing it with the city's blessings once they look it over. There was a one-page grant that we missed it by a week of me being on this board. It was a one-page grant, and we could have at least got $1,000. I mean, it's just a one-page thing for $1,000 that we could have, and that wasn't even a matching grant. That was just a grant given to us. So there is grants out that we can do as a board, and we are allowed to do with the city's blessing. So that those are some of the things that I'd like to see us try to do. If we can try to generate that revenue with, without having to reach out more as well. So. I've been looking at them online and so forth.
Heretofore, all our grants have come through the city manager. And we have been an advisor to the city manager on various grant projects. So I don't know if that's changed or not, but we can't represent the city, we can only advise the city.
That's right, but
That's right, but in the rules for our board, we are allowed to fill out the grant paperwork, but anything obligating the city is always a rule that the city has to give us our blessings. We do not have that authority. Never.
But trust me, no, I don't think there's any, back me up on it, I don't think there's anybody on the city staff that's gonna say, oh, no, don't be doing that, I got this one, don't worry about it, I got it. No, I mean, it's, anything that you think you can make a positive impact on, by all means, put it out there. It's, only the city can obligate the city to do things, and at the end of the day, they have to sign off on it. I mean, it's got to have the blessing of the council, and then the city manager signs off on it, and he's basically the signatory or the mayor. But yeah, I mean, anything you can do to help with the building that sort of thing, doing the ground laying and the footwork, by all means, I don't think anybody's going to stop you there. Am I saying anything out of school?
I
Kyle?
don't know if city manager would agree with you wholeheartedly. I think everything has to be, he needs to know what we're thinking on these. We can bring it to him and say, we want to put in a grant for this, but ultimately, he's the one that writes it in response to what we don't.
No, we bring it in front of the council. What we do is we bring it in front of the council. The city manager executes what the council says.
It's a collaborative process. I wouldn't say, no, I mean, don't just come up to a council meeting without any prior notice and say, hey, we've made these contacts, we've written the grant, can you sign it? No, the collaborative process starts with, talking to the the city manager and saying, hey, there's a grant out here that's come to our attention that kind of aligns with our strategic plan in this area, and the board thinks it fits nicely with where one of our stretch goals or whatever. How about you allow us to kind of research it some more and build this thing, and I will keep you in the loop. I'll report back in 3 weeks with what we find out and whether we want to continue with that. And it's just it's the old keep your boss informed and make him a part of the process, because at the end of the day, I mean, he's the guy who signs off on it, and don't surprise your boss, and just kind of no surprises. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
No? You're not hearing that, or?
I don't know, I wish we had the city manager here. So we could-
Well, I think the point here is, remember, when you come in front of the council with something, all you're doing is just showing it. You're not saying we're going to proceed with it. And when you bring it in front of the council, the city manager is always there as well, so he can give us
That's
his
blindsided
input. We
the
could
city
do it,
manager.
we could do it at a work session. You don't have to necessarily do it. We can ask to be put on the agenda at a work session and just present it there and let them take a look
His
at it.
door is figuratively always open, and if you bring together a positive thing, again, a recommendation, not just, hey, we need to do this and throw the ball in his court. It's like, hey, this is a great idea. I've done some homework. I'm willing to do some of the legwork. I'll keep you informed of what we find. I don't think anybody's going to argue.
I mean, we're
with
not
that.
keeping him out. Well, he has to prove it at the end of the day. That's the thing. Yeah. We don't have the authority to just, that's like I was saying.
Hey, you've been on this board a long time, and maybe things are changing or whatever, so if I'm saying something out of school or you don't believe anymore, then I'd be happy to get with you and we'll go sit down with the city manager or the council even.
I just, I don't want to get involved in something that's going to be a surprise to the city manager.
Oh, no, I would never do that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
It's all about communication.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I agree with that. I mean, if you haven't done anything that's going to bind him or paint him in a corner or commit the city for anything or spoken out of turn, I don't see any conflict there, I really don't. Tax dollar value, we talked about grants, we talked about defined states, aesthetics and community, we talked about the marina parking lot. Take a look at some of these things. Again, you're going to add some of these things. There's some blank spaces under Goal 3, Aesthetics and Community. We talked about defining the end states. Take a look at the boards and the parks, at the marina, those things. What should it look like?
Right.
Where do we want to go with the grants, that sort of thing. Communications, engaging the community, make sure they're getting the word, because we have a very diverse, highly skilled demographic here, and we don't have a skilled database here. One of the things I think we really need to do is kind of understand what expertise is living in our backyard and start tapping into those people and say, hey, we've got an issue or a problem here. We noticed that your background is this. Can you help us shed some light or insight into this? Do you have
And that
some
would be a big
informal
cost
contacts or
savings.
network that we can tap into? And you'd be surprised what's out there if we don't know what we don't know right now. And we need to
Right.
start tapping into that sort of thing. Communications, beach waterfront.
We're at about 5 minutes too.
Yeah, we need to get going. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I
Wanted to do that. We
I
appreciate it.
actually have highlighted some things that I'd like to, maybe, if you're willing to come back.
Anytime, think about this stuff,
These
pencil
are
in.
some, I have highlighted some things of the packet that Patty sent me to my home, that I'd like to maybe discuss with the board, with you here, if you could come in the future and
Of
we'll
course,
talk about this
I'm at your
more.
disposal. Like I say, I like the opportunity of being able to discuss this with you.
Thank
We're
you
all,
very much, I
we need
appreciate
to
it.
get the word out there and understand how this works. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, thanks.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. This marina lot we have, can we lease it to somebody
Maybe he wants something.
who might want to put a bait shop there or sell fuel? Or No, we have out the other end of the causeway.
That's something that we need to address as a board. And
Patty, you got a copy?
I'm going to be sending in a records request so we know where we stand with our properties within the city. So I'm going to reference every one of those, okay, just so you're there. So I'll be sending out records requests for every one of the properties that involves this board, just so we know where we stand, what we can and can't do with each piece of property. And then that will help us decide on how we're going to generate revenue, help generate revenue for the city, how we're going to move forward, how we're going to handle things, and so forth. I mean, you know,
It's a large piece of property down there, and there's
It is,
a
it
whole
is.
bunch of different things that can be done.
right, and so then when we even look at the
That-
grant,
That's an option, and there are all types of options.
Yeah, a lot of boaters in the community. It'd be nice to have a bait shop there,
Yeah.
and.
Yeah, there's really, well,
I think
we
we
need,
do.
I think there was something we need to look at, there's really no
Something,
access, if you
yeah,
come in
yeah.
and no one knows.
Yeah,
And
well,
the bait
and-
shop's been great, I think, as a
yeah.
guy that likes to fish. Yeah.
Yeah,
If I go
Right.
down to Indian Rocks Beach, you get.
right.
Well, they have it over,
over
just over the
the
bridge too.
causeway, yeah.
Yeah, but you could actually,
Those are
you know,
things
they
we need to
have a
look at.
small little restaurant in with the
We have
bait
to
shop.
look and see if
So,
that.
so there,
if
it
they're
could be a
profitable.
couple things could move into one small
Yeah,
piece
they-
of property.
the
But the
restaurant
thing of
might-
it is that end of the property, okay, we have a couple slips that are no good, so we don't rent them out anymore. So that would put us at that end of the property and away from our residents pretty much. So,
What does a slip there cost approximately per foot?
$7 a foot.
$7
No,
a
I was
foot?
gonna look it up. Sorry.
Okay, I just
I'm
curious.
gonna
It's $7
switch out, I'm recording on my phone. Cause I
okay.
know Patty's gonna need this.
Oh,
for
okay,
this
so that's yours,
meeting.
okay.
Thanks, Kyle.
But just keep talking, I'm recording here.
Thanks
Okay.
again for the great job. you did.
Oh my God, you're
Yeah, if
great.
you got any questions on the emergency
You're-
management, I'd be happy to answer. I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you were
Yeah.
asking me.
Well, I just,
Well, we're
I
not
could
done
probably
here,
give
so
us a
let's
fair
just
amount of
keep going.
feedback.
He's recording, so let's keep
Yeah, we're
going,
recording.
so we can get out of here, because Burke's kids are doing the pledge tonight.
Right.
I'm gonna ask the whole board to please stay for the first few minutes of the council meeting if you can, okay? All right, so, the discussion of the trunk or treat, everything's in place, other than we will have to, you know, we voted on our safety plan, on how we were going to proceed with it and everything. I spoke to the trophy people today. He said he could have the plates changed out within 2 days. So we'll be getting with Kyle this week, picking up 5 trophies, and have them done, and then ready for the trunk or treat. Okay, just kind of going over the plan. You know, the kids will have to be there that want to participate in the judging. Will meet at the exit, okay, of the park at 9th Street here, this exit. And they will, what I'm asking to do, so because some of them are residents, so we don't show any partiality, or somebody doesn't think we're showing any partiality. I'm gonna ask the parents to drop the kids at that, where we're gonna barricade off at that end, and they go stand up somewhere, okay? That way, the judging, no one knows pretty much the kids. I mean, most of the people know the adults, but not the kids. That way, you know, it should help with, and it's gonna be
Shake 'em
closed
off
off, so
your
the
leg,
kids
bro.
are not gonna go anywhere, okay? So the kids aren't gonna go anywhere. So we have five trophies that are being done, I will take in to get done. I gotta get with Kyle and pick those 5 trophies up. We'll get those dropped off, and then I'll pick them back up. Then we'll have them ready. I have somebody who's interested in paying to replace those plates on those trophies. And all we gotta do is stick their sign in during the event. So
Yeah.
anytime we can get revenue sources just to cover expenses, that works for me. I will find out the cost of that and present it to them if they're interested. You know, I say we go with it if everybody's okay with that. Is everybody good with that?
Yeah,
Okay. 'Cause it's probably $25 to them,
sure.
okay, at the most, to
Yeah.
replace those plates. So, the other thing I wanted to go over was any other business. Okay, do we have any other business that we need to address at this time? I know that we will have the kids' Christmas. I think we'll address that at the next meeting.
I sent Patty an email about evaluation of the festival we just had.
Oh, I actually sent out a survey to all the sponsors, booth runners, and I have a brief synopsis of it,
Please, yeah.
but I'm gonna give this board everything that I have at the next meeting. Since we're on a time frame, I didn't get to do that. But I will be presenting a small synopsis of it to the council
No, what I
tonight.
want to do is evaluate.
Okay, you got a headache.
That's it.
All right, so anyhow, I think we're good. Is there anything else we need to address? Okay.
Adjourn.
Real quick, I will put out notice for the next meeting 2 weeks in advance. Does that work for everybody? And then you get back to me right away though, because if it doesn't work for you, so we can get it on the calendar,
Got it.
okay?
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Adjourn.
Yes. Hey, Burke, after the council meeting, can I have you sign